Welcome to the Behavioral Observations Podcast, stimulating talk for today's behavior analysts. Now, here's your host, Matt Sikoria.
All right, we are underway with the 9th installment of the Apollo Case Study Series. I'm joined as always by, well, I shouldn't say as always, because you skipped the last one, Jim, but we had a fun conversation without you. But you're back. I'm glad to see you, of course. And so this is, again, the 9th installment of the Apollo Case Study Series. You've put together a really interesting topic of mentoring and supporting staff and things along those lines. I'm excited to hear everyone's thoughts on this. And by everyone, I mean we've got a big cast of characters here. So, Jim, I'm going to hand it over to you and let you do some introductions and take it away from there.
Well, great. Thanks, Matt. It's good to be back, and really enjoyed the episode that you and Kristen put out. I thought it was outstanding. Usually, Matt likes to start his episodes with how you got into behavior analysis. I think for sake of time, I'm going to let each of you introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit about a quick blurb on how you got into the field and what your role is at Apollo. And we'll just go from, on my screen, I have Lauren first, so we'll let Lauren go, then Valencia, and then Chesley. Tell us a little bit about yourself for the audience.
Hey, I'm Lauren Elliott. I have been in the field for 20 years now, and just kind of fell into it. My first job out of college, I didn't know anything about ABA in 2003, and had an interview and was, to be what was at the time, or what's equivalent to an RBT, even though there wasn't that credential then, and really was just super impressed with the effectiveness and the direct impact that it seemed like was happening, and have been in the field since in various capacities. But right now at Apollo, I am the clinical director of our Lawrenceville location.
Okay. Well, I'm Valencia. I've been in the field for a little over 4 years. The way I got into ABA is kind of funny because I graduated from college and had no idea what I was going to do. And my mentor actually invited me out to dinner, and she talked to me about the holistic practices of ABA. I gave it a shot, interviewed, and I kind of fell in love. And I am a case supervisor at the Johns Creek location.
So my name is Chesley Herring, and Valencia, like you, I did not know what I was going to do when I got my undergrad. I took a year to think about it, and I was scrolling through LinkedIn and saw some postings, some job postings, checked Indeed, and I saw a ton of postings for RBTs. I had no idea what I was getting into. I applied, got hired on. I started off as a behavior tech. I fell in love with it. I started my grad program 3 months later, and I've been in the field for about 3 years. And I just recently got my BCBA certification. So I've only been a supervisor for 3 months. So very, very new to me.
Great. So we got a very diverse set of experiences. And I love, Valencia, that you already used the word that we're talking about today, mentor. This is my 26th year in the field, and I can't imagine where I would be were it not for the large number of great mentors I had. But before we start our discussion about this, I think we should try to define what we're talking about, because we are behavior analysts. I looked around, and I think the best definition or the best description I found actually came from Business News Daily. It said a mentor is a seasoned professional who formally or informally guides a less experienced person in their professional endeavors. And so this suggests to me that the mentoring process should go throughout our career. And we, at some point, are not only the mentee, but also start to become a mentor. So this is a big topic. I get contacted all the time from BCBAs in other places of the country asking if I will formally mentor them. But because we take this so seriously and intentionally at Apollo, unfortunately, I'm only able to really focus on the wonderful team we have here. So why don't we start with you, Lauren, since you have the most experience on our panel, and talk about what role has mentorship played at the early part of your career. And then let's compare that to Valencia and Chesley's experience, who are in the early parts of their career.
Sure. I feel really lucky that I have had really great mentorship throughout my career, from the very beginning, working as a tech, until now. In the very beginning, not knowing at all what I was getting into, not knowing what ABA was, and coming into the program where I started working, at the time, since there was no RBT credential, there was no mandated supervision. So, especially considering that, I feel really lucky that I had really great supervision. I had BCBAs who were really supportive, always there, really collaborative. Even the directors of that program were really involved as BCBAs, but as directors. And because of that level of support, even when there were a lot of challenging times and working with some pretty tough situations, I always felt so supported, and I always felt heavily mentored in a really good way. And I think that really shaped me wanting to continue in the field and wanting to become a BCBA, because I saw the value in emulating what I received early on in my career for people who are getting started in the field. And I think that because of those early experiences for me, it really did create that desire for me to become a BCBA, so that I could, in large part, not just work with the clients and families, but in large part, really try to pass on all of the great things that I received to people that are moving forward in grad school and beginning BCBAs.
And so now you're 20 years in. And so we'll talk a little bit later on about now how you act as a mentor. But what about those mentorship activities that you still receive? Do you feel like you're still in a role where others are serving as mentors to you? And talk a little bit about your more recent experiences with mentorship.
Absolutely. I think that's something that personally I really want. I want to have people who are mentors for me. And I think in the position that I am in now, obviously you, Dr. Moore, are a mentor for me here at Apollo. And that's something that I really value. Beyond that, I think being in a role as a clinical director, where a large part of what I do is serve as a mentor for other people. I think I'm in a position now where I have to go find some of those other mentorship opportunities on my own, and looking for those and finding the people who can serve as mentors for me is something that is important to me in terms of staying engaged and staying inspired, I guess, and learning new things, and not feeling stagnant. But I definitely feel like I still receive that. And I think that's something that for me is really valuable, to make sure I continue to have those opportunities, throughout the tenure of my career.
Right. And Chesley, you receive a great deal of your fieldwork supervision with us. You were one of our behavior analysts in training, and now you're a new case supervisor. Talk about think about back to when you first joined our team through now, and kind of talk a little bit about the role of mentorship for you.
So when I first started at Apollo, I was at the Johns Creek location, which was a bigger clinic, and I was under one supervisor who, when I moved to East Cobb, that supervisor also came with me. I was really lucky early on, because I came to a smaller clinic, that I didn't just have one mentor, I had many. I had all of the BCBAs that were in the clinic. They're so small, so I was able to collaborate and go to them with programming, with building treatment plans, with learning how to create behavior plans. And so my mentorship looks a lot different than a lot of people, and I know how lucky I've been. So I can comfortably say that I've had more than one. And then as I got into the BAT role, it kind of shifted to where I was mainly under one mentor who has been here, I think almost 8 to 10 years, not at Apollo, but in the field. And I feel that I was able to really take on different parts of those mentors, and it has definitely impacted the clinician that I am. And I'm also very lucky because I still work very closely with the people that I consider as my mentors. And in recent months, we've taken on a couple of new BCBAs, so I really feel like I'm adding to that as well.
Yeah, I really like this notion that, sometimes you can go into some settings where mentors are super protective of their supervisees and don't want other people messing with them, and that sells the trainee short, because we should glean from all the experiences of the people on our team. Anybody can be a mentor to you when they share that wisdom or that past experience that they've had. Of course, when I think about my career, I have the main people, 5 or 6 people that I think really impacted how I think about the science of human behavior. But then I think about everyone who's contributed, and that list of mentors just becomes extraordinarily long and stays long. And some of those mentors from earlier in my career, I still consider mentors today, and which is great, because you never get all of the answers. You never corner the market on smarts. So I still call on those people to this day when I feel like I need them. Valencia, talk to us about your early, 4 years ago, and kind of get us up to today with the role mentorship has played, and specifically since you joined our team.
So my mentorship experience is a little bit different than Chesley and Lauren. Mine had some ups and downs. So as an RBT, getting my hours was very tough. And I had to really learn to advocate for myself and be persistent on what I needed. Now, don't get me wrong, some of it was really great. Like, I learned how to program, how to write reports, and like how to write behavior analytically. But the support that I needed was a lot of trial and error. Like, it was a lot of feedback on what I did wrong rather than teaching me what I needed to do. So that was really my true teacher. However, my mentorship as a BCBA, because I'm only in my second year, has been tremendously different. I've never felt so supported and like uplifted since I've came to be a BCBA at Apollo. For me, it's like I've never really needed a lot of direction, but the reassurance that I get, the positivity, and there's just these suggestions and ideas have really made the difference in my career. I feel like I've become a better case supervisor than when I came into this. Now, more than ever, I feel so confident. And I feel like if I had the confidence when I was getting my hours, I think I would have a whole different experience altogether.
It's so great. In today's day and age, you hear lots of people talk about what a supervisor should be and what a mentor should be. And the truth is, I think about my experiences, and they're so varied in the personalities that I've really encountered. What would you say? Let's start with Chesley this time. If you were talking to someone, they've just gotten into the field, they're trying to seek out mentors, supervisors, what qualities about a mentor would you advise them to look for?
I would definitely say look for someone who is willing to collaborate with you. I think that when I first started out, I was able to go to my mentors, my supervisors, and bring about my opinions and the decisions that I wanted to help with cases. And instead of, they treated me as I was a colleague on their level, and I didn't feel as though my questions were too silly for them or my opinions didn't matter. And it gave me the confidence to then make decisions for my kiddos. I would also say a quality that is really important for me when I was a mentee was a BCBA that is willing to say that they don't know something. I think that something I learned recently in the past few months as I'm gaining confidence as a case supervisor was I put so much pressure on myself on succeeding and making the right choices. And I think that if I did not have mentors that would look at me and say, you know, I don't know, but these are the resources that we're going to look at to find a solution, I don't think I would be as confident as I am now. And also a mentor that is okay to let you try and fail, because I learned a lot through failing, and learning how to, again, use my resources to come up with a solution.
I think that's so important. You know, we often say here at Apollo that the most important phrase a BCBA can say is, I don't know, but I'm going to use the tools of science and all the resources I have at my disposal to try and find answers. You know, now at this part of my career, I'll go into sessions and make suggestions and have to be, you know, real specific with younger BCBAs, say, listen, most of what I know has come through a litany of failures early in my career. You know, it's like, oh, I learned that the hard way, because when I used this procedure, the kid smacked me right in the face or spit in my eyeball or something like that. So, and then what's so great about it is if you persist with it and you have good mentoring, those mistakes or failures or whatever you want to call them, they start to become less and less and less frequent. And you start to build momentum and confidence in your skill set. What about you, Valencia? How do you feel about this particular question?
First of all, Chesley hit it right on the head. Humility is like a huge thing with me. I don't ever want to be like, I don't want anybody to feel like a supervisor needs to be on some type of pedestal. Like, because if you put them on that pedestal and they make a mistake, that is a very hard fall for you. You know, you always want to look for the more humble BCBA there for you. But another thing I would add is transparency. This job is hard. It is very hard. And for me, I didn't like when my supervisors tried to make it seem like this job is very glamorous. It is glamorous. There are some great points. But at the end of the day, it's going to be hard. We deal with a lot of severe behaviors, time management skills, parents. There's a lot of factors that go into it. So I think it's important, if you have a supervisor that's going to be honest with you, that's going to tell you the truth about the situation, rather than trying to make it seem that everything is just peachy key and everything's just going to go the way you want it to go. Honesty is key. And I feel like that's one of the biggest qualities you need to look for in a mentor.
Yeah, I can remember still to this day, one of the mentors I value most was one that other colleagues of mine really didn't care for, but I could always trust her to be brutally honest with me. And early in my career, that's what I valued. You know, my background before becoming a behavior analyst was I was a musician. Well, if your mentor in music always just tells you how great you are and never says, hey, guess what? You kind of stink on this, then you're probably not going to get many paying gigs if you try to go out and be a musician. And I think in behavior analysis, I really always valued, I hear now so much, and we should be, you know, we should act with positive intent, and we shouldn't just purposely go out and try to be, you know, jerks to the people that we're mentoring. But we also, I think, have a duty to be truthful. And if something is not going well or if something is not right, then we have a duty as mentors to be honest about that. I value that. Like for me and the type of person I am, I don't want to stink at my job. And so I value being told when I'm doing things that don't reach an acceptable standard, rather than just everything is sunshine and rainbows. And Lauren, in your position now, given you're a clinical director, lots of RBTs in your clinic, lots of people thinking about the field. Probably you've practiced in multiple states. You have a lot of people contact you from there. What would you tell that graduate student, person thinking about getting into it, or even a new BCBA, what to look for in a mentor?
I totally agree with all the points that have been made so far. I think those are really, really important things to look for. One thing that I would add would be finding a mentor who's willing to, or has the ability, I guess, to ask you the right questions to guide you to where you need to be, as opposed to just telling you the right answer. When I think back to writing my thesis or doing my thesis in grad school, I remember, coming up with all of these ideas, and probably some of them were like off the mark, at least to begin with. But I feel really lucky that my advisor led me in the right direction, but did it in a way where I still felt like these were my ideas and I was coming up with them. And that led to me being really excited about it and feeling really invested and feeling really good about what I was doing. And he just did a really great job of asking the right questions to get me thinking the right things to get me where I needed to be. In Lawrenceville, we've started doing group grad student supervision because we have so many people in grad school for ABA right now. And each month when we meet, one of the grad students presents on a client that they have that has a program that maybe isn't making much progress. And they present the graphs, and then the other grad students all kind of troubleshoot and think about ideas that could be changed and modifications that could be made. And the case supervisors and I are in those meetings, but we really try to stay pretty quiet and just let them talk about it and let them come up with ideas. And then the feedback that we give is just kind of asking those right questions to get them on the right track, but not just give them the answers. And through doing that, I think we've seen more excitement from them, and they feel like they have a lot of buy-in and investment because these are their ideas that they're coming up with, and they get excited about trying new things. So I think that finding somebody who can do that, who isn't just going to come in and tell you what to do, but help you get there on your own and help coach you to get there, is something that's valuable and a good learning experience.
Yeah, I think that's so important because, I think not just in our field, in a lot of fields nowadays, you see this tendency for everyone, just kind of like they had experienced in school, they want to be told all the answers. And, when you're a quality healthcare provider, such as BCBAs are in this space, you really have to be able to think on your feet. And I think one of the best ways to do that is to have a mentor who's drawn that information out. I mean, you've been to graduate school, you've gotten all this information. Sometimes you have to have those right, almost like Socratic questions put in your way to bring that information out. And also is kind of like, I had a BCBA recently say, this would go a lot faster if you just come in here and tell me what needs to be fixed. And I said, well, the old saying is really true in this case. If I give you a fish, I feed you once. If I teach you how to fish, I feed you for life. If I just come in and every single time fix every problem I see, then that's not going to help you. That's not going to help the clients that you serve. And so I think that is so important, is to kind of lead the person you're mentoring to those right answers. And I like what you said about staying quiet. I've done that a lot when I'm in group supervisions, and really only chime in when I see the direction is going kind of in the wrong direction. They're not really talking about things correctly. But even then, I try to guide them back to the right answer rather than just, boom, here it is, because, I don't have a patent on everything in behavior analysis. We can all learn from one another. And I think I've learned as much being a mentor as I have being mentored myself. Would you say that you, like I talked about earlier, I've had, probably 5 to 6 people I consider main mentors. And then I probably couldn't even count if I, were to list everyone I've gleaned information from and learned from. I probably couldn't even count how many mentors I've had. But would you say that you've had more than one mentor? I'm assuming based on our conversation already, the answer is yes. But what different qualities did you glean from each one of those? And let's start with Valencia this time. Good or bad?
Okay, so I like to say I have a community of BCBAs. I feel like it takes a village to really raise a child. At least that's what my mom says. But for me, I think it's true in this field. So, like I mentioned, my first mentor, who's all about my career development. She's always meeting with me or talking to me in passing because she's a family friend. She's like, Valencia, I think this is what I think you could do. This is what you can do with your degree. This is what you can do outside of ABA if you really choose to. And I feel like that's very important to me. It gives me reinsurance that, there's more out there past ABA, and it makes me feel very supported and gives me a lot of ideas on where I could go. But at the same time, I have also BCBAs who are newer in the field who have really helped me become the BCBA that I wanted to be. Now, I feel that tenure doesn't matter. I feel like sometimes the newest BCBA has some of the freshest ideas and very innovative, and it's important to acknowledge that. And one of them actually works at Lawrenceville, and we've been friends for a long time, and she's helped me throughout the process as an RBT and as a BCBA moving forward. Same thing with another friend that lives elsewhere. I feel that the qualities you need are consistency, honesty, humility, but also at the same time, just a passion for you. They want to have the best intentions for you. And I feel like I've surrounded myself with people that want that for me. And I think that's really what has made my career development so great.
That's really awesome to hear. Oftentimes when you get as old as I am, you can look back and think, back in my day, things were, X, Y, or Z. But it's really nice to hear that with really kind of the front line next generation of BCBAs like you and Chesley, to hear such a really well-rounded perspective on mentorship. Chesley, what about you? I mean, I think it's no secret amongst us that one of your main mentors has moved on, gone to another state, and is having other opportunities. But that doesn't mean necessarily that mentorship relationship stops. So, would you say you've had different mentors, and what has each brought to your career development?
Yeah, I would say, Valencia made a very good point. I think it does take a village. I think Apollo has really made it a point to make our village big. And for me, my two main supervisors, because I'm so new as a BCBA, I still sometimes feel like I am still very, very early on in my mentor-mentee relationship. So I still collaborate with them very often. And so my first mentor, I do still reach out, and there is still communication. If I'm struggling with programming or just decision-making, I'm able to reach out to her. Early on in my career, I always thought that there would be a separation. Once you pass your BCBA exam, you were on your own. You wouldn't have as much help. I was very pleasantly surprised to see that that is not the case. I can go to my mentors every day if I need to, and they welcome me. They make me feel very, very supportive. Something that my second mentor, someone that I see every day still, she has been in the field for a very long time, and she is just very calm and collected in her supervisions. And that's something that I've had to learn how to be. So definitely in behaviors, I want to have the solution right then and there. And she has taught me that sometimes you're not going to know what to do right away, and that's okay. She's also taught me to be way more confident in the decisions I'm making. And again, it just takes time. Things don't happen overnight. Progress is not linear. And that was something that I really, really had to be okay with.
I think that's a great point. I think I've had ebbs and flows in my career, and I can see periods where I was like, man, I was really, really doing outstanding here. And then other times where it's kind of like, hey, maybe I slowed it down. I've always had really good mentors and colleagues to help pull me out of that. Well, Lauren, of course, we're all BCBAs. So now it's great to talk about how we're mentored, but now we're looked on as mentors as well. Talk to me about how you've developed your skills as a mentor, and how you would describe your mentoring style?
I think that a large part of how I've developed my skills as a mentor comes from the way I've been mentored, and things that I've learned from past experiences. It's hard to. I have had a lot of mentors at this point, 20 years in, and it's hard to delineate necessarily like what skills or styles came from who. And I would imagine at this point it's an amalgamation of all of them. But the things that I think I have paid attention to, I guess, that I try to be cognizant of now in my style is, certainly meeting people where they are and seeing what kind of leadership and what kind of mentorship they need, and what's going to reach them in that moment. At Apollo, we all just did the leadership training that we went through, which I think was really beneficial in thinking more critically about like what our leadership styles are and how we can best reach people that we are mentoring and leading. I try to think about who's ready to be pushed a little bit out of their comfort zone, who's ready for something new. Because I had mentors in my past who specifically would, I think, recognize me in those moments and push me to go out of my comfort zone and push me to try new things. And had they not done that in that moment, I may have missed out on an experience. I think that there's a lot of beyond clinical mentorship. There's a lot of kind of professionalism mentorship that we maybe don't talk about as much, but is necessary in being a mentor. Things that I've learned from past mentors, trying to emulate some of those styles too. I think certainly it might just be like my age coming out in this next point as well. But I think really thinking about empathy and approaching people from an empathetic standpoint, whether that's our coworkers, parents, the clients that we work with too, and really trying to think about perspective taking and how we are approaching people based on where they are in that moment. But I still reach out to all of I think everyone who has been a mentor to me. And I love that no matter how long it's been since I have talked to them, that always seems to still be welcome. And I think that that's something that is so great about our field, that's just kind of implicit in ABA, that we can always reach out to those people and that's always welcome, and it's always okay and well received.
Can I jump in here real quick?
Go ahead, Matt.
Sorry. Lauren, your response to Jim's question, I think, brought up some interesting things, and maybe this is on the agenda to get to later, so I apologize if I'm jumping ahead of the line here. But one of the things I'm curious about, not just from your perspective, from everyone's perspective, is as you've made this transition from the mentee to the mentor, what are you seeing as the needs of? Are there any commonalities, I guess, in terms of what the needs are for the people you're supporting currently? Because you mentioned that, talking about some clinical issues and things like that, but also issues of professionalism and things like that. Are there things that people are perhaps need more support in areas that you're seeing these days? I'm curious to get everyone's perspective on that.
I think from my perspective, I would say that there's maybe more for case supervisors and BCBAs in this setting where, we're in a clinic, we have a lot of people here that we're dealing with, just a lot of humans, coworkers, clients, parents. I think that there are a lot of situations that come up where the case supervisors will want some guidance on how to approach these situations, not clinical things, but more like relationship type of things, and maybe a sensitive situation. and what's the best way to approach it. Things that we don't talk about in grad school.
Right. I was just curious. That was what my gut was. If I had to like guess what the answer would be, there's a lot of it has to do with personnel management and relationship development and things along those lines. So, but I'm certainly curious if there are other thoughts on that from.
Well, I think Chesley can talk to that. We just discussed this in a one-to-one supervision we had about a week ago, and that's things they don't teach you in graduate school, which is how do you motivate and inspire grown human adults, to do a job that's very hard and sometimes very monotonous. If you're with the same group of kids every single day, and I'm in one of our clinics today, and we have a newer client, and he spends 8:30 to 10:30 welcoming everyone with screaming. And, that can get old after a while. I told my wife last night, I go home, I hear screaming during the day. I go home, I hear it at night from my 2-year-old, who I'm ready for him to turn in his terrible 2 card and be done with that club. But that's definitely one thing is, when you transition, Chesley had the unique experience of being an RBT in our clinics, and now she's a supervisor. And, I think you want to talk about that interaction we had last week, because I straight out asked her, I was like, how confident do you feel in inspiring your team every single day?
Yeah, that has been one of the toughest parts of the transition for me, is going from being a colleague to a supervisor. And just like Dr. Moore said, is knowing how to assess the motivation and apply it to where they're wanting to come to work and work with kids who all day long are engaging in behaviors. And so what I was seeing on my team, and not just my team, and I've been guilty of this as an RBT, is we started engaging in avoidance behaviors. So after Dr. Moore and I had a talk, we had a team meeting. And we've taken leadership courses over the past few weeks that I've started to use in my team meetings, and something we called a facilitating leadership style, where you just ask questions like, what about your sessions that are really difficult? How can I better support you? And I feel that I came out of that with answers and solutions and able to make a plan so that it can ease some of the not stress, but some of the concerns that I had. I will say that Apollo does a really, really good job at making that transition from a tech to supervisor by adding the back position. In that role, I was able to see directly what it meant to be a supervisor. I was allowed to go in and supervise, but also get feedback from my supervisors on that. So I definitely think I'm in the best case scenario, because I have other friends who work for companies that position does not exist. And so they're a tech one day and they pass their exam and they're thrust into this supervisor role, and they really, really struggle with it. So I'm just happy to be supported in an environment where I was taught how to, at a fundamental level, deal with situations like this. And then to be able to take it to, like, even you, Dr. Moore, it's nothing clinical by any means, but it's still an important topic in discussion.
I just want to jump in here. So for those who might not be familiar with that position, it sounded like an acronym. Is it behavior analyst in training? Is that correct?
Yeah.
So for the non-Apollo folks, let's try to describe what that is and how that's worked for you guys, and perhaps I think you did a great job of contrasting that to maybe business as usual, certainly, but just I want to make sure we don't lose anybody in the conversation.
Yeah, of course. So the behavior analyst in training is exactly what the title suggests. You're taking out of your role as a technician. You're doing half the time, you're still direct treating a kid, but you're also getting a ton of those indirect hours, or the unrestricted hours. So you're doing a lot more programming, you're doing a lot of supervising, and it's just teaching you how to morph into the role that you will take on as a case supervisor.
Yeah, so they usually, when they're around 80% done with their fieldwork supervision, and we're considering backing that up even more, they're paired with a senior case supervisor, and they receive basically, hey, here's your brief introduction into learning how to become a behavior analyst. So Chesley and one of our other bats also did a day and a half of training with me that we usually do for new BCBAs during their onboarding. And we really try to give them, if they've kind of come up through our ranks and been part of our team, we want to try and give them as soft a landing into what is a real demanding job as possible. And so right now, Chesley's moved into that BCBA role. So we have a new bat at her clinic. We have a bat here in Johns Creek, and I believe we are looking to get one at some point in Lawrenceville. And then they go on and hopefully decide to stay with us and become BCBAs and kind of see, rather than what Chesley described, which is, hey, guess what? You're not direct treating anymore. Now you get to go and do parent training and do an assessment and write programs. And maybe they've never done that before. But to get back to your earlier question, Matt, about, since I've been doing this for a little while, I noticed, and I know not all training programs are created equal, but I've noticed that as the number of training programs has increased so exponentially to meet the demand, a number of really bright and talented people are coming out of some of these, especially online programs, and they don't seem to have had this passion for intellectual curiosity stimulated, this critical thinking like Lauren talked about earlier. They've become very accustomed to being told the answers. And unless you find someone like Valencia, who was obviously raised in a family that valued these traits, a lot of times it's like, wow, there's a lot here that we're going to have to, if it becomes, the truth of the matter is mentorship is great, supervision's great, but if you don't have a personal passion to take it upon yourself to increase your skill set, to get better yourself, there's only so far your mentor is going to be able to get you. Because they have their own job duties. They have other people that they're mentoring. So I think that this one thing that I really see is this lack of intellectual curiosity. It's like they know what they have to know to take the test. And I don't fault the student. I fault the programs. I can remember when I was a graduate student, I turned in my first draft of my dissertation to my graduate mentor. And I got it back in 2 days, and I was so excited because I was like, man, I'm going to get this knocked out. And in this, 150 some odd page document, there was something like 92 red question marks, nothing else, just red question marks. And so I went to his office and I said, hey, what's all this? He said, well, number one, I want you to take each place you see a question mark and see if you can determine what my question is, and turn that into me in a week. Let me tell you, I hated that. I hated that I'd rather be punched in the throat. But when I look back on that, and when I look back on how much easier that set me up to be successful, to not only conduct my dissertation, but to then defend it to a committee of PhDs, that was really, really valuable. Now, he could have probably given me a little bit more than just a bunch of question marks, but it forced me to go in and critically analyze my own work. And nowadays, I see people who are every bit as intelligent as I am, and and talented, but because they've never had that type of experience, they're not strong in their critical thinking or their skepticism, especially when it comes to their own work. And let me tell you, I've heard Linda LeBlanc talk about this a lot recently. If you're not including your own work and your own thought processes in your skepticism, you're missing out on a lot. So I see that as a big thing, and that's a great transition. And Valencia, I'll throw the question to you. You just recently took it upon yourself to go to a conference on your own. Bravo. How are you personally targeting the development of your own skill set, and what is it that you're targeting, and how are you going about doing that?
So it goes back to what I said. What I look for in a mentor is humility. I don't think I know everything. I'm too young in this field to feel like I know everything. I read Cooper. I read the big ABA exam booklet. I've seen tons of videos. I've been in classes, but I cannot say for 100% certain that I know everything I need to know. And if I am looking to be the person that I want to be, the person that I know my techs need, I need to always look for information. I need to always look for the next thing that's going to help my practice. Because if I become stagnant, like the word Lauren uses, I love that. I love that you used it. If I become stagnant in what I know, then I'm never going to get to where I want to be. Because if I stick to what I know, where is the growth? Where is the learning? How am I going to make sure that I am the best person that I can be for my clients, my staff, my parents, and for my colleagues? So I'm glad that you shouted out the conference that I went to, because that was a whim. One of the BCBAs in my community suggested it to me, and she was like, "Girl, let's go." And I was like, I don't have a reason not to. So I went, and let me tell you, it was one of the best experiences I've ever had. And I got to experience it early on in my career. So it really just light a fire in me. There are so many topics out there that I would have never thought about if I did not go to that conference. I learned about OBM. I learned about fluency, supervision practices, the difference between being a supervisor and a mentor, and how those interact. I also learned about the importance of doing FBAs and the difference between FAs in schools and why that's important. It's just, there's a vast world of knowledge, and there's so many people in this world that can help you with that. And putting myself in a position or in an environment where I can absorb more learning has made all the difference. Like, I came back as a different person. I was only there for 3 days, but let me tell you, those 3 days were one of the best times I've had in a while.
I can't really underemphasize how important going to conferences was, especially when I was a graduate student. And the fact that now, I mean, when you're in an online program, that might not even be mentioned nowadays. It was required. I had to go to 3 conferences a year as a graduate student, and it was so important. And, when I think about what I do today, that was going to a conference about 15 years ago, just walking into a conference hall about a topic I'd never heard of and saying, "Hey, let me see what this is." And here now, 15 years later, relational frame theory is like a very important part of what I do every day as a behavior analyst. And that wouldn't have happened if I had not gone to a conference. Chesley, what specific things outside of your mentoring encounters are you doing to improve your skill set?
So recently in the clinic, we were all discussing ACT and AIM, and I've had a little bit of experience with it, but it's definitely something I'm not comfortable with. I have some kids who I think would benefit from it. So as a team, we had one of our BCBAs sign up and take the course. And we're actually reviewing what she learned next week. And so I'm very excited to know more and grow my skill set so that I can then apply and program it for some of my kids that are definitely heading in that direction and some that are already there.
Awesome. And Lauren, I think when you get in positions, where we're not as much client facing as we used to be, but administratively, it's real easy for our days to get all jammed up with meetings and different things. But what activities are you trying to do to kind of keep your skill set sharp, or maybe even develop new skills?
I've also, in the past few years, been really actively trying to learn more about ACT-based interventions. I find it just really interesting personally. And, in my role now, the way I'm applying it is using it more as an approach to coworkers and to parents. And if there's, an issue that needs to be resolved, really trying to take a values-based approach to creating a change in behavior for our staff members, and trying to get buy-in from them by having them involved and basing it off of their goals and their values, and coaching our case supervisors here to also use that approach for the RBTs that they supervise and the parents that they're doing caregiver trainings with, if it's applicable and if it's relevant for those situations. And And then beyond that, I have just I reach out to different people that I know in the field, past mentors, if I have a specific area that I want to learn more about. And, often if they don't know, then they'll put me in touch with someone that they know who does know something and might be able to provide me with information. And like we've talked about, kind of creating a community and growing a community. It's like this spider web of behavior analysts. And eventually you find someone who has relevant information for you and is willing to kind of spend time to talk to you and give you some resources. And I really appreciate that about our field.
A lot of times we talk so much about positivity and supervision and all of these things. And obviously that's important. But I can remember when I was early in my career, I had sought out a mentor in a specific area and was so excited. And I was in a feeding session with a client, and I don't remember the full context, but somehow we didn't have text back in the day. That's how old I am. So it was a behavior data specialist. So I was the therapist feeding the child. My behavior data specialist is there collecting the data. And we just started chit-chatting, like during the session. And I can remember hearing my supervisor's high heels coming down out of the observation room into the session room and said, "Do you think this child's parents with this medically fragile child has time for you to sit around and chit chat instead of actually engaging with the client? You think that they're here so that you can visit with other staff?" And it was a verse at the moment. I can remember I was like trying my best not to burst into tears at the moment. And I kind of went through a range of emotions, anger and all these things. But then when I really started thinking about it, I was like, she's absolutely right. And that has been an encounter that has endured with me to this day, where, I talk a lot about, like with the meeting Chesley and I had last week, I said we have to instill a sense of urgency in our staff, the urgency of every moment we have with these kids and what it does to the trajectory of their quality of life. And I won't call anyone in specific. I won't make you throw anything out there unless you're comfortable. But
Jim, hey, Jim, before you queue up that question, I can't help but to remark on that little story there, because I had a very similar experience that I recounted in the previous podcast with Kristen. I won't bore you guys to retell it here, but I think sprinkled in this conversation is just an interesting conceptual aspect of mentoring and support is that it's like these unprogrammed accidental usages of mild aversives, and it's not like we're saying, or at least I don't think we're saying to obviously there's so much. It's massively important to teach and to ask questions and to lead and supervise and support through those types of methods. But man, I think everyone who's been in this business long enough has a story like that. And guess what? You never did that again, I'm sure, right? And the mistake that I made that I recounted with Kristen a few months ago, same thing. And I don't know what to make of that. So I'm going to also practice the I don't know part of this conversation that we were talking about earlier. And I don't think we could program for that either. And we don't. And the message here to folks is, not to do that on purpose. But I also don't think. I think as we analyze what our learning processes are over time, we should be aware of the role of some of those very, very clear moments when you get the flashlight in your eyes and say, like, hey, don't do that. It's really important that you stop doing that. And it's important to have that let's say that you're talking earlier about honesty and being upfront with people and things like that. And, I think the dance that everyone's trying to navigate is like, how do you have that level of I don't know, I guess, honesty, candor, what have you, without making the scenario so aversive that you put someone, you have someone that actually does burst into tears and runs away and, says, oh, the hell with this field and whatnot. So I don't know. It's more of a comment than a question, but it's an interesting, not just from a practice standpoint, but from a conceptual standpoint about how these relationships work.
Yeah, it's really curious. One of the instances as a mentor I'm least proud of is this is back when I was still doing kind of the dual, running an ABA training program, working clinically. And I had a student that if I had to meet with her one more time about how to graph on Excel, because this was before you had all the graphing programs, all the other things. And so everybody was using Excel. And I'd gone through and shown her step by step, very nicely, given her, I think back then the popular article was a Mark Dixon article in Job about how to graph with Excel, gave her that. And so we're in her last semester at graduate school, and the poor dear still can't make a graph happen on Excel. And I remember I had already had a bad day. I was a younger supervisor at the time. And I just went, listen, if you can't figure out Excel on your own, then the complexities of this field that you're about to enter into, you might as well give up now. And I regret saying, I can remember exactly how I said it, because the moment it came, it's like one of those instances when the words are coming out of your mouth and you're trying to drag them back in as they're coming out. But I really kind of lit into her, and she got upset. She left my office crying, but she came in the next day with all the graphs to her thesis. Perfect. And I said, and I was still kind of in a mood. I was like, so did you get a colleague to do this for you? She goes, no. I stayed up until 3:30 a.m. until I figured it out. But I still, that former mentee still stays in contact with me. And I'll often, I saw her at ABAI a couple of years ago, and I was like, I still feel bad. She goes, don't. That was the first time I needed a slap in the face, and I was being helpless and waiting for you to do everything for me. And the truth is when I graduated, you didn't come to my first job with me. I had to learn that I had to take responsibility for myself and to develop my skill set.
I think one of the things that I talked about with John Austin in a recent podcast a lot is the importance of developing relationships, and you have to do that from a foundation of a solid relationship. And if you don't, you do run the risk of sending that person. It's like so. It sounded like that you guys had a rapport that was established where her catching you in a weaker moment of where your thoughts were perhaps inartful, at best. I don't know. Again, it's just more of an observation than a question. So
anyone else would like to share where maybe either you were the recipient of that type of situation, or maybe where you were the no, I think
we're going to run out of time if that's,
hopefully not too many at Apollo, but I think maybe we all, or maybe the better question is, I think what Matt kind of sprinkled into that was this idea of relationship building. And we talk about it with our clients, how relationship building is like the foundation of what we have to do to be successful. How many of you, and I know Valencia, you and Chesley are earlier in your mentoring career, so you haven't mentored a lot of people. So for you two, it sounds like you're staying in contact with a lot of your mentors. Lauren, at this point, are you hearing from those people you've mentored? And how frequently would you say are you staying? Linda and Tyra Sellers in their 2016 supervision article, kind of a similar article in supervision, talked about the post-certification relationship. How many of you are keeping up those post-certification relationships?
I do still stay in touch with a lot of the people that I've supervised and mentored. There are a lot that still reach out to me for specific questions if it was relevant to something that we had done in the past. Or a project that we had worked on together in the past. There are, some that still reach out with, maybe a kind of professionalism questions or things like that. But, I would say in addition to that, there are a lot of just colleagues and peers that I'm still in touch with. And those relationships have kind of are dynamic, I would say. And sometimes one of us is the mentor and one of us is the mentee. And that kind of changes depending on the situation and what we both need in that moment. And, sometimes even with the people that I've supervised, sometimes, like Valencia was saying previously, there are new BCBAs in the field who sometimes have the freshest ideas. And sometimes I will even reach out to people that I've supervised in the past because I know that maybe they're more up to date on current research, and I'll get ideas from them. And I really value that we can have that mutual respect and the ability for those relationships to be dynamic and change in the moment based on what we both need.
Yeah, I think that's so important. I hear from a number of my former students quite frequently, and I still reach out to. I emailed or I actually sent a text to one of my graduate professors. Now he's now been retired, going on 10 years, and he's a drummer like I am. I had to send him a message the other day saying, "Hey, I had a dream that we went to ABI and challenged Scott Geller and Matt Broadhead to a drum off." And just got a chuckle out of that. I think it gets back to that relationship. Now, with this final question, I'm going to kind of try and bridge two areas so that maybe everyone can respond to this. Quite frequently, I'll log into LinkedIn. I'll see a BCBA that maybe I taught, somewhere I taught in the past, or someone I just knew, or they were just on my LinkedIn, and they have 2 or less years of experience, and they're announcing their promotion to a clinical director or some administrative position. When you're thinking about your career, we've talked about this soft landing that we like to give in this progression, like, Valencia and Chesley, you could be in a company that might be trying to push you into that kind of role. Either with that situation, this idea of early in your career going into such a clearly mentoring role, or in general, what advice would you give to that BCBA with 2 or less years of experience about either taking that type of position maybe too early, or just in general the best approach to maximizing their skill development? Let's start with Chesley this time and just kind of go around.
Less than 2 years seems like not enough time under my belt where I would be comfortable moving into that position. I think that some people really focus on the admin side and maybe feel more comfortable with that versus people who really want to be directly with clients and directly with supervisees in the treatment role. I think that if you were in that position and you were trying to make the decision to move into it, I think you just really need to think about your values and where you would want to see yourself further down the road. So for me, I really value being with my kiddos and honestly with my techs. The admin side is a little bit tougher for me. So yeah, that's just something that I would tell new BCBAs to really think about.
Yeah, really develop that. In my mind, it's tough to think that I'm going to jump into all the admin side before I've really tried to develop a robust set of clinical skills. Valencia, what would you tell someone? They call you up, "Hey, I've been a BCBA 6 months." What are you going to tell them?
Well, if you've been a BCBA for 6 months and you're trying to be a clinical director, I'm going to say power to you, but be prepared.
Just in general, what advice might you give them just in general? Maybe you tell them, "Hey, let's say no to that job. Now let's focus on what do you tell them instead of just no to that job. What do you tell them? Hey, here's some things to do to maybe get ready for that job down the road."
Well, okay. So there's 2 parts to that question, but the first part would be know how to advocate for yourself. Waiting for things to happen is a waste of time. Be humble, be persistent, and to get your needs met. Now, this doesn't mean you go out and just demand whatever you want, like this, that, and the other. But It means meeting with the person that has mentored you, your supervisor, your current boss, wherever you are, and telling them what you're looking for. And if you don't know what you're looking for, look at the job descriptions for what the role would call for and think about what skills you have and what you don't have, and then ask for help that way. I feel that a lot of people that I've met and a lot of RBTs that I have experienced wait for things to happen. And I'm not that kind of person. I had to learn very early that if I want what I want, I need to open my mouth and say something. Closed mouths do not get fed. Shout out to my mom, because that's what she said. And to me, that's what you really need in your career development. Waiting for things to happen, it's like, it's not good for you, man. It's going to hurt you, because you're going to be like, man, why didn't I get what I wanted? Because you didn't ask for it, because you didn't say you wanted it. And I tell my techs that too. They're like, oh, I need more support. I want to learn how to do this programming. I'm like, cool. I'm glad you said something, because that's the first step, telling me what you need.
Right. We're not mind readers, right?
No, I'm certainly not.
What gets me sometimes is, I would say, the less confident BCBAs that I've mentored, when we have those mentoring activities, and maybe it's a slight pattern of avoidance, they just want to put out the things they're doing really, really well. I'm like, this is not really of any use. This is great. Hey, great. But then, you get under the hood and you start getting into some of their other cases, like, wow, we're really struggling over here. Why aren't we talking about this? I love that idea of be intentional. Don't be afraid to say, maybe it's based on our learning history. I know as a musician, I didn't hear great job very much. If you watch the movie Whiplash, which is about drumming and being in jazz school, it's very much like being a music student. You get treated horribly. I had to learn how to advocate for myself and to speak up and say, hey, I don't know this. Tell me where to go. Tell me what to do to learn this set of skills. I also loved how you talked about looking at the job description. And I think one thing young BCBAs should ask is, how will I be mentored? We make it here at Apollo an intentional part of the interview process. We tell them, this is how we mentor. I make hours available. They have their case supervisor. They have a clinical director. They have their colleagues. But I think a lot of times BCBAs go into these new jobs, and unfortunately they look more at the salary than what is it going to do to get them where they want to be in 5 or 10 years. Lauren, you have a little bit more experience under your belt. What would you say to this person? I just got offered this job as a clinical director and they're brand new. What are you telling them other than just, hey, don't take that, to focus on in their career development?
Yeah, that would certainly be the first thing I would say. But beyond that, I think that, a large part of being a clinical director is giving people clinical guidance. I think I've talked a lot in this episode about other things, but I think still a huge part of this role is going in to help troubleshoot for clients that aren't making progress and figuring out different modifications, and how can we help resolve some of these issues with challenging behavior so that we can focus more on skill acquisition. And for a new BCBA, no matter how good the graduate school experience was for them, there just isn't the breadth of experience clinically. There's just no way they have all of those skills, in their wheelhouse yet, to be able to give good, sound clinical guidance. I think that early on as a BCBA, it's easy to kind of have one experience implementing a certain methodology one way, and we can get stuck in thinking that is the way to do it. But working in the field for longer, we realize there are a lot of different ways to implement the same thing. You can implement a DRO a whole lot of different ways, but if you've only done it one way, then that's probably the way you're going to tell somebody else to do it. So I think that, becoming a clinical director early on, there's no way that someone just would have had all of those different experiences to draw from in order to critically look at a situation and have multiple different examples of things that could be done to draw from and figure out what's the best approach.
That is such a great point. I think about my last 2 years here at Apollo, and there's been more than one occasion where Kristen and I have had to split the clinical director duties at various locations. And for that very reason, it's like, yes, we know we have people who have it in their DNA to be a clinical director, and probably a great one, but we do them a disservice by thrusting them into that role too early in their career where they've not had enough diversity in their experience. I think because as a clinical director, they all come to you with all of the issues. And if you don't have that diversity of skills to pull from, then we just start replicating the same. What if it's not the best version of DRO or the best approach, the best way to do a functional analysis or whatever? We start to replicate that, and we take good people and put them in the wrong position. Timing is so important in something being wrong or right as well. My daughter is literally within that 6 to 12 month period of being a new BCBA. She got a good job right out of graduate school. Her clinical director quit within, I think, 2 or 3 weeks of her taking the job. And she called me and she said, "What should I do?" I said, "Whatever you do, don't let them put you in that role." Right? It's just too early. It's just too early. And don't let the money blind you. Don't let whatever, the title, whatever it is so important to build that diverse skill set up before you step into that role, or else you'll be lost. I think that's so great. I think there's been so many things that we could talk all day long about mentoring and mentorship. It's such an integral part of what we do here at Apollo to try and just help each other keep building our skill set up. And at the end of the day, we get to help kids have better lives through doing that. So I thank the three of you for coming on. I know it can be nerve-wracking, but as Matt says, it's pretty laid back in this environment. And I really appreciate each of you sharing your experiences from where you are in your career.
I want to echo that. I appreciate you guys sharing all of what you had to say. As you could probably see, then listeners won't be able to see, but I was at various points giving thumbs up and making all sorts of gesticulations of agreement, approval, excitement, etc. So many good pearls of wisdom in this episode. Before we head out here too, I would also just encourage folks, if they want to learn more about Apollo, we'll have links to everything Apollo in the show notes. And I would also, Jim makes himself available very well also. And so hit him up on LinkedIn. I'll put his LinkedIn profile in the show notes as well. So this has been another great Apollo case study series, guys. Thanks so much.
Thank you for listening to the Behavioral Observations Podcast with Matt Sikoria. You can find Matt's notes on this episode at www.behavioralobservations.com. We also invite you to stay connected with us on Facebook at facebook.com/behavioral observations and on Twitter at Behavior Podcast.